brother. I should have asked this before I hit record. It's too late now. Brandon Vedder, correct? Vedder is how I say it.
You got it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Let me find my notes from when I watched it. Yeah, I actually was going to try to reach out to David. I just have never. I'm sure. I think you've seen this. I'm pretty bad at email. Like I get busy, I forget to respond to something. It's like, oh shoot, need to.
Right.
Yeah. And I just never actually went to the website to try to find his email address. And never.
Yeah, he's kind of in hibernation right now. Anyway, he's
Well,
not
it's
really
winter.
doing. Yeah, there you go. Yes. So you know what? Don't feel like you wasted anything because
Oh, I didn't waste anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just show up to his show and be done with it.
There you go.
Yeah. All righty. Well, here we go. Let's do it. Brandon Vedder, welcome to the podcast. Excited to talk with you. I was really actually excited. I don't know if it was you or Keith Giles that gave me permission to watch the screener version of Strange Negotiations. And then it was definitely me that didn't watch it and try to contact you before it aired real time. So apologies for that.
But, no worries.
Thank you for your generosity, or Keith's. I'm not sure whose generosity. I really enjoyed it. But welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Stoked to be here.
Yeah. So I always start with the same question because I like it, and it's a good way for me to kind of figure out what I'm allowed to ask you and not. So what would you want people to know about you? Like, what is kind of your story? And then we'll kind of dovetail that into like how you got into doing documentaries, like why that matters and why Strange Negotiations.
Yeah. That's such an interesting question because it's kind of like non-denominational in its approach, where it's usually like a professional question, like about, as a filmmaker or whatever. So yeah, it kind of opens the scope up quite a bit more.
It's almost like I've done hundreds of these.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think I'm really interested in trying to kind of unravel mysteries within myself and the things that I've kind of encountered in life and in the communities that I've been a part of, in a personal way, in hopes that that's helpful for others. Yeah, that's kind of I was doing an interview for the last film. Actually, when I was in production on this film, I did this interview with this journalist who had went back and watched all my other films and noticed this movement towards spirituality in the films. Because I started making concert films and touring with rock and hip hop acts, and shooting concert films, and then kind of got more into social issue stuff, and then made a film about silence and humans' relationship with sound, in a very, it's a kind of more experimental walking through that to this film. And yeah, I think that's like the things that translate the best are the things that you're really interested in, and that you have a stake in, and you personally have maybe some demons to deal with. So yeah, that's been my approach, is just trying to figure out the things that kind of turn me on and go after those things in hopes that other people can be helped by them.
Would you call yourself religious? Because you talk about, filming and kind of searching for, like, I forget how you said it. I'm badly doing this. Where, there's something in the work that you're doing that's kind of speaking to something that's going on. Like, are you religious now, or are you just really like music? And, or how do you get there?
Yeah. Faith has always been just the most interesting thing, period, to me, where it's this kind of superpower, like it and it is so uniquely human. It is the thing that sets us apart, and it can be the best thing and the most beautiful expression of humanity, and it can also be the very, very worst. It allows us to be our best, to be our worsts. It allows us to imagine the most beautiful things and the most terrifying things and do those things. So, you know, to me, like, that's storytelling. Yeah, you can't pull them apart. And so, you know, I've always just been so interested in kind of people's expressions of faith. And, you know, if someone is willing to die for something, or if someone's willing to give their lives to the study of something, like that feels worth it to me. To at least engage with a little bit and, you know, try to kind of understand. But yeah, you know, in terms of the faith that we deal with in this film, kind of the American evangelical tradition, I wasn't, you know, like, grew up, you know, kind of church adjacent, had a pretty, I was born in Chicago, and, you know, we ended up out in California after a while, but had kind of a pretty tumultuous upbringing. So it was more, you know, survival than, you know, like trying to get to church every week or whatever. And it wasn't until we kind of landed in this sleepy town in Northern California, later in high school, that I got involved in like a youth group, and, you know, this version of the thing started to be laid out in front of me in a way that I found pretty compelling. And so that started the journey. And, you know, it's definitely been there's always been things about this expression of it that has made me deeply uncomfortable, and just doesn't seem like the point. You know, and so it's a hard thing to just kind of whole hog be like, yeah, this is my tradition, this is how I view the world, because it's not that simple. But there's also so much about it that I do see. And, you know, it's been interesting with touring this film, people, you know, asking just straight up, you know, in front of 300 person audience, like, what do you believe right now?
You personally?
Yeah. You know, at a Q&A after the screening or something like that.
That's not fair. That's not fair. There's too many people there to have a good I mean, unless everybody knew going into it, you most importantly, this is what we're going to talk about. That seems like an unfair question. I would ask you that on this show. I'm not going to, by the way. But I take that back. The last question that I'm asking everyone this year is going to be like, when you say the word God, what do you mean? So you can go ahead and get that in the back of your head, because I'm asking it to everybody, because just a little behind the curtain scene. I'm not going to edit this out because I feel like at the end of the year, I really want to make like a super mix. Like the entire episode is just those answers.
Cool.
Just bam, 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 with some really cool orchestral music that probably won't work, but whatever. That's my goal. So I have a question. What the heck is a concert film? Like, is that the same thing as a documentary? Is that a music? Like, what was it? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, you know, it's really just, you know, kind of like, what's that channel on TV that just plays concert films? It's
VH1.
No, it's just, what the heck is it called? But it's just a live, you know, it's just like a capture of a live show.
So like Coachella, but all day, every day.
Yeah, totally. And so it's like, you know, I did one for Pearl Jam, and it's like Pearl Jam live at the Garden, you know, so it's like a specific show that, you know, was special in some way, and, you know, we decided to release because of something. So
that's cool. I told Spotify to play me good music on the way home today from church, actually, and that's what it played. I listened to Alive from Pearl Jam. I can't remember the name of that album. It's Pink. Is it 10? Is that the name of that album?
Yeah, that's the first record. Yeah.
Oh man, I was like, it literally started. I was like, I can't. Just cranked it. Windows, because it's 70 here in Virginia today at night, and so like I just rolled the windows down, jammed like it was the summer. Incredible. Really enjoy. I forgot how good the song was. Anyway, I didn't mean to talk about Pearl Jam, but it's not often that. Anyway,
right.
It works well. Spotify's learning me a bit too well. I have a question about silence. So I want to relate it back to why you think silence holds so much tension in the relationship, especially when we think about God. But prior to that, I just recently listened to a different podcast called 20,000 Hertz. I don't know if you're familiar with that show or not.
I'm not.
It's literally by a guy from America, somewhere in America. His name is Dallas Willard, but I don't want to say he's from Dallas because I'm sure he's not. Or Dallas Taylor. Dallas Willard's an author.
Yeah.
And he runs De Facto Sound, I think is the name of his company, which like does like music and stuff for movies and video games. And but he, like, in one of his first episodes is, here's why the NBC chime works, and here's the story behind the NBC chime. And apparently there's a fourth note that they play, like when the president declares a national emergency. Like there's like a fourth, instead of boom, 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 there's a fourth note, which basically means like, get to the TV. World War IV is happening, kind of thing.
Oh man,
yeah.
But I love that old school broadcast where those little things. Oh man,
he's done so many different episodes. It's called 20,000 Hertz because I think it's the last thing that you can hear on the spectrum. Anything. Got it. There's one called 433, so it's 4 minutes and 33 seconds. That's composed by somebody. Are you familiar at all with this song?
Yes. So John Cage is the composer, and the film In Pursuit of Silence, we kind of profile 5 or 6 different people's pursuit after silence. Was
Cage in the film, or Cage's work?
Cool. He's passed now, but his story and his kind of finding of silence, because he started off as this crazy ass noise musician and just like this avant-garde
programmed piano, is that what it was called? Something like that.
Yeah, just like all these patch bays and all this crazy shit. And he when he found silence, that was this really kind of specific era in his life. And everyone says that he kind of never stopped smiling after he found and forged a relationship with silence, and kind of the understanding that it's always there, that it's this kind of beautiful bath that we get to enjoy, regardless of whether we are cognizant of it or not. But just it was kind of like God for him, where it's like there is this omnipresence of silence that we're breaking it, hopefully only when it's important. But yeah, so him and his journey towards silence, it started with him kind of stepping into this thing called an anechoic chamber, which just kills any sound reverberation, and it's maddening. Like, I didn't know actually that I had tinnitus until which is a crazy ringing in your ears from all the concert stuff, until I went into an anechoic chamber, and it was like, oh dude,
so loud.
It's so loud. So he was a big part of it. There was we spent a lot of time with a monk, a Trappist monk in Iowa, and then a Buddhist monk in Japan. A guy that it was his job for the National Park Service to preserve the natural quiet of the parks with kind of the power of the government behind him, in terms of just like creating, or maintaining what this piece of land always sounded like.
So what's it, just like a perpetual guy that drives around saying, "Get off my lawn, get out of here," basically.
Pretty much. Yep.
That's a great job. You get out of here. You're too loud. I want that job.
Yep. Oh, dude, it's amazing. Yeah. So that was an incredible experience, and just like such a rad, nerdy thing to be able to kind of travel over and see these people that are so committed to this pursuit. This kid walked across the United States over a year in silence. He was one of the guys in the film, and so kind of all over.
I'm gonna have to watch it. I was not like that other production company that you talked to, where I watched everything else. I didn't do that. But that sounds So when I listened to that, I was actually folding laundry or ironing clothes. I'm that guy that like I iron the shirts for the whole week because then I get like 10 more minutes of sleep time, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And I have on like a nice set of speakers on my ears. And
Yeah.
And at the end of that podcast episode, he's like, all right, so we're gonna do 4 minutes and 33 seconds. You're gonna listen to it in its entirety. But because we're so uncomfortable with silence, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to have 2 minutes and 9 seconds of silence. And then he would come back on for a quick seconds. Now 30 more seconds. And you come back on. He's like, and this will be the last time you hear from me. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah.
Don't hit stop.
Yeah.
Finish it with me. And I was really uncomfortable with it because I come down to the basement, the mess of a basement that you saw earlier.
Yeah.
And like I try to do like the examine and other things, but even down here in the hole, it's still not silent. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not silent.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
No,
it's crazy. I mean, we to go further on that, when we premiered the film at South by Southwest from your home state, and we got musicians to perform for 433 before every screening, which was so interesting because so we would have them do kind of like this palate cleansing piece of music, nothing lyrical or whatever, but just kind of like, sit down, chill out, and then go into 433, anywhere from like a quartet to like this crazy ass rock band to this MC, and like just there's such a fascinating energy that happens in a room when you're silent for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. It's like, because you get really uncomfortable,
there's just tension,
and then, and then you get over it, and then you get uncomfortable again, and then you get angry, and then but it points back to you, which is the thing that I think is so genius about it, and so genius about kind of at first I thought it was bullshit, like when I just like this art school blah 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 before I really knew much about John Cage. And then when I realized it, or when we started doing it, I just realized this incredible power, and just the uniqueness of that moment where literally some people will never have the experience to be in community and silent for that long, their entire lives.
Yeah. So the most current film, I didn't realize how long we've been talking, but without talking about that, but I'm enjoying it. So is Strange Negotiations. And so it kind of follows, what is it, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years? How many years were you following?
4 years. Yeah.
4 years of the life.
Yeah. Like 3 years, 2.5 years. And it took about 4 years to make all in.
Yeah. Yeah. So of the life of Dave Dazan, which if people don't know that name, he is I guess the voice, a portion of Pedro the Lion, which is a fantastic band, and many people know that band. I don't think as many people know David, because you kind of check out when people stop singing things that you want to hear.
Right.
Because you can do that. You can just turn the dial on the radio. So what possesses a person, Brandon, to go, you know what I want to do? I want to jump in this little car and just ride around with this guy. Like, what possesses somebody to want to, like, why David? Why?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, because it's so hard to make a film. It's so hard to make an independent film, something that people aren't clamoring for, something that people aren't asking you to do, that you just are kind of like, through the sheer will of force, you're going to push into this world and talk people into the fact that they need to see this. So yeah, like it was, it's a hard decision, because my other films, I've had more collaborators making the other films, and they've taken 3 or 4 years each, and so I kind of I knew what I was getting into to a certain extent, so I had to be really, really sure about it, and also just like the weight that it has on my family and finances and personal health and blah blah blah. But I was finishing In Pursuit of Silence, and was kind of sensitive about what was kind of next and where I was interested in going next. And I was on this, we were living in LA at the time, and I had this shoot in Mexico. And so I just grabbed some podcasts, earlier in the days of podcasts. And this guy, Pete Holmes, this comedian,
He's hilarious.
Yeah, and he had Dave on the podcast, and I remember Pedro the Lion, you know, and I had a couple of their records growing up, high school and stuff, and then kind of lost track, and but I remember, you know, him singing these hymns, and I just, you know, I remember that there being this kind of like really fascinating depth to what he was doing, you know, when I came across it in high school, because that's kind of when I started to have my own kind of understanding of the existential, so it had a good connotation right away. And then, you know, they had this hour-long conversation that Dave walked through this journey and walked through this worldview, with this candor and kind of a reverence, but you know, personally reverent, um, systematically irreverent, maybe, or politically irreverent.
Probably all of the above.
Yeah, in a way that I had just never heard before. You know, he tells a story of after he lost, you know, kind of officially, you know, let go of his faith, this, you know, these panic attacks that he would have at night, where he felt like God was coming to him and threatening his kids to eternal damnation.
Mm.
You know, and just, you know, this stuff that people just don't, you know, don't really talk about, you know, kind of like, but yeah, so anyway, but there was just this beautiful love for this community. It wasn't kind of like this, you know, Hitchens or Harris or, you know, new atheist kind of like, you're an idiot if you believe, you know, you're a lemming, blah, 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 opiate for the masses. It was very much like, um, he, you know, he just embraced the tension of losing his worldview in a way that was crazy. So anyway, super just kind of caught on fire by that conversation. I went home actually and downloaded and put together all of his lyrics in just kind of like a homemade book on, you know, 8.5 by 11 paper, so I could read, you know, in time, you know, this guy's life and, you know, his artistic expression of this losing of a worldview, because it's all there, you know, from the beginning as a, you know, a guy that thought he was going to be a pastor, you know, to the end where, you know, he is probably closer to an atheist than he is now. And so, you know, it's just like this incredible, yeah, just like work of what it looks like for a human to lose a worldview in the moment, and, you know, with the emotion and the smoke in the room that music can provide, the context that music can provide that can't be said in lyrics, and, you know, it just was so honest and so helpful, feeling that, you know, I thought that, and especially after reading it kind of in that 2-hour sit down with the book, you know, as kind of a, you know, documentary kind of format thing in a couple hours, you know, it was just like this undeniable thing that, you know, there was something really helpful happening here. And this was, you know, pre-Trump, you know, pre kind of the, you know, defined, yeah, like the American church hadn't defined itself as specifically, you know, as it had after the election.
Yeah.
So it just, you know, you kind of knew that there was a lot of cancer in there, but, you know, it wasn't, you know, obvious,
That's an
on a
understatement.
large
That's the
scale.
biggest
Yeah.
understatement I've heard today. Kind of knew that there was a cancer. That's a good way to put that. I'm taking that. I'm making it
Yeah.
mine. I'm not even going to give you credit because nobody will know.
That's fine. Do it. That's a comment on your podcast, not on.
Yeah, fair enough. So either way, I'll say I heard a guy say, and I like it. That's what I'll say. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it was, you know, it yeah, that kind of started this thing where it was like, I think that there's a feature documentary version of this thing that's really helpful. That starts some conversations that I want to have, and I'd like to see other people having as well.
Yeah. So just recipe questions for making a documentary. So, I mean, just in recording the podcast, like I thought about all the junk I'd have to carry around with me just to do this.
Oh yeah.
And so I'd have to actually add another mic, like if it, like literally all the junk.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, as you were, you're in people's houses, and if people don't understand what I'm talking about, then just go rent the movie, because I'm going to talk like you've seen it. And if you haven't, that's your problem, and you should buy it or rent it and then come back and finish the episode. Because I have seen it, so we're going to go with that. So you're in people's houses. Like, how do you have to get like express permission, or is that just like, yeah, everybody that bought a ticket tonight, by the way, I got a guy in the back, he's filming the thing, just ignore him? And like in the back of the car, like I found myself, like, I know that people don't talk to themselves the way that David was talking to himself in the car. Like when I talk to myself in the car, I don't speak in the second or third person. Like I just usually talk at the other people.
Right.
Yeah. Like logistically, how do you make that sausage? Like you have to give waivers, or like all the things. How does that even work?
Totally. Well, I knew from the very beginning, approach wise, that I didn't want to kind of rely on more traditional documentary methods in terms of like sit down interviews and just that I wanted to take a more narrative approach to it, a more kind of in the moment, fly on the wall, verite approach, where we're just, things are just unfolding in front of us, because that's really what was happening. It was really dangerous from the very beginning, or it was a fine balance to make sure that it didn't feel prescriptive or suggestive in any kind of definite way. That the truth was, this is a dude that has embraced the tension of his life in many different ways. His spirituality being one of them. This existence as a middle class musician, in a dying kind of economy, musically being one of them. The negotiations between family and blah blah blah. All these things were being negotiated in the moment, and so it was really important to set myself up in a way to be able to just be sensitive and be interacting with those things, and be really be able to fit through kind of any space. And so the first tour that we did with the house shows, and the house shows, it very quickly it became clear that this was the setting of the film. This was his desert. He was out in the desert trying to find his way back, and the house shows were this desert. It was also an incredibly interesting environment, where it's just like you set up this pop-up show and people come sit on your dirty carpet or your parents' couches with your memorabilia around, and no one can be too cool in that setting. You're peeing in someone else's toilet, like the toothbrush is right there, like it's a really disarming, kind of interesting thing. And Dave made the most of that in a way where he used that to help create this inclusive environment where people felt it's Bible study-ish, in the way that it goes down. And so yeah, on that first trip that we kind of did, actually we played a show in Lynchburg, Virginia, which is in the film.
So time out. I was at that show. I'm not
in
your film. Yeah. So I went to Liberty. So I was at,
I remember you saying that.
When it popped up, I was like, God, that looks familiar. So I started scrolling back through Facebook, and I'm like, son of a. Yeah, I was at the show. But again, a big fan of David.
This goes into your question. Did you have any idea that I was shooting? Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that. But I'm always that guy that stands right next to the back door, even now. So that I can just kind of leave without talking to anybody at the end. Right. Because I don't really like to.
Yeah.
Which is weird considering I do this in my free time now. But there's a certain safety knowing that you're on the other side of the continent.
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Well, but I think that that's an interesting thing where it's like, and I think it answers your question to a certain extent in a way that's encouraging for me to hear is the idea was to be totally invisible in these things. And even though there was 3 cameras going at the same time, and I had a snake of XLRs going from them back to where I was recording it, and a set of stereo mics in the background. The idea was that it does not change the audience experience whatsoever.
Yeah, well, I think as well. So I got used to at Liberty when they would bring bands. Like filming was just a thing that bands did. So
Totally.
I think I don't know what I don't remember thinking anything, but I know what I would think now. Like, oh yeah, they're filming it. Okay, so is everybody else on their phones, filming it.
Totally.
So whatever. That's what people do.
And that's kind of the nice thing about this era is like no one has to know, that it's anything more than just kind of personal archive. And so anyway, on that first tour, which was in 2015, I actually had another DP out with me, a cinematographer, friend of mine. And it was incredible because we were able to really, kind of strike the visual language of the film together. And it was so helpful to have him out there. That was the last time I really I really had anyone else out, and we shot for another 2 years because it's such a intimate thing, like everything in the film is so intimate in hotel rooms, in cars, it's like I'm always an arm's length away from Dave. And so I couldn't have, a guy with a boom pole sitting over Dave. I had to figure out, sound. And then, like the logistics of it was a nightmare, total nightmare. And it was like, it kind of bonded Dave and I. And he's told me since in, some of these Q&As after the screenings that like that was kind of watching me lug in and out more gear than he had to every time. And, kind of made him, think that I was for real and that he was going to mess with me.
Did he offer to help?
No.
Which was good.
Which is good. And that's the thing. Like he didn't ask me to make a film about him. He wasn't. It was very much like these 2 separate things happening, and I wanted to keep myself separate from what he was doing. And he was kind of, he was varying levels of uncomfortable at what I was doing. So he wasn't really talking to the audience about what I was doing. I, would be, get a hold of the persons that had the house beforehand and get their clearances and all that stuff. And then, it's easier to do groups. So you just, you put a notice on the door as everyone walks in, and they're releasing their image at that point. So, and then, when people would get into big conversations, I would have them sign a waiver afterwards that, kind of was a little bit more than just a general one. But it's, and then in the car stuff, so it was between, podcasts and this kind of time in the car is what took the place of what usually would be like a sit down interview. And the idea in the car, which was also a nightmare because it's just the worst place technically production wise to do something like that. You need pristine sound and picture, and you're literally hurling through the world that's 70 miles per hour, changing, lighting and sound, situations. And, but I did a shitload of research beforehand and just found, I'm sorry,
you're good. You're good.
Okay.
You're good. I mean, we're 40 minutes in, but you're good. No, it's totally fine.
Okay, it's all been very tame thus far in terms of how I usually
you could say whatever you like.
Okay. So the idea there was, Homeboy's in this driver's seat for longer than anywhere else he is in his life. This is his kind of homeostasis. Like this is his thinking spot. This is, you know, where he is most comfortable. And we would have these 6, 7, 8 hour drives, you know, from show to show. And I knew that I didn't want to interview him, you know, like I was very careful to not ask questions because I didn't want answers in a specific tense, or I didn't want an answer. It was just, you know, it was starting conversation, because the idea was just to open the front of Bazan's head and let the audience into this kind of process, the kind of work that he's doing out on the road. So yeah, that was, and I had no idea if it was going to work, and I had no idea if it was going to be enough, but you know, to the chagrin of some of the people kind of on the outskirts of the film, I was pretty hard-nosed about not doing interviews or doing interviews with anyone else from the band or his family, or, you know, it was a singular perspective film, for better or for worse. That's just what it was.
Yeah, well, I liked that. So specifically, like, I would watch him talk with his kids. You kind of hear him talk with his wife, and like there's just a brokenness in his voice that you also hear when he's singing. Like it just made it. I mean, we've all been there. Like I'll have to travel for work every once in a while, or I mean, most of my family's in Texas. Like, you know, there's just distance destroys things. So,
well, and that's the thing where it's just like I just have so much faith in, you know, humans as empathizers, you know, and just emotionally intelligent people that can pick that shit up, you know, that there is so much nuance. And
I mean,
you know,
kids aren't watching the movie. It should be adults. So
yeah you know, it's just in pauses in the conversation, and, you know, like, and that's so much more of a complete and powerful telling of their relationship at that moment than it would be if I was interviewing his wife and like, how's your guys' marriage? You know, like it's all there in reality. And obviously, you know, it's not the full picture, but I think, you know, I think that they would agree that, you know, that I know that they agree that it's an accurate representation.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a question. So I wrote a few things that David said, and I'm curious your opinion on that, because you don't really have an opinion in the film, at least. Yeah, not really. So there's two things that I wanted to ask you about. So one of them, David says, where's it at? That there's an attempt to sloganize the Christian culture. And then what does he say after that? Like apparently, yeah, he's like, you know, it's not a pruning issue. It's a rip the whole tree down and burn it. Most of Christianity is apparently cool with idolatry. But I'm curious your take on that. Like when you hear David, or when someone says that to you, you know, Brandon, stop sloganizing Christian culture. And you kind of named it earlier, but I'd like you to just drill there. What does that mean?
Yeah, you know, I think that our brains and our you know, our way of communication is compartmentalizes and breaks things down in a way that sloganizes things, and in a really helpful way, you know, in terms of breaking down really complex ideas, and can be in a really dangerous way as well, where literally the only important things are left out of these kind of you know, axioms or retellings, or, you know, kind of the point is lost very easily, the nuance, you know. And that's the thing about the faith that Jesus Christ put forward, in my estimation, is that it's all in the nuance, you know. And it is it's such a holistic kind of just approach, worldview, that, you know, like it becomes really dangerous to sloganize things and to, you know, kind of market things, and so I think, but, you know, it's just like, that's also human nature. So it's not this kind of like crazy evil thing. I think that we, in trying to understand things, we're putting things in specific boxes and trying to break them down. When it comes to this question of idolatry, I really, really resonated with that. So that he talks about that because we watch him in real time, and a factor of the film is that we're kind of, we're traveling with Dave as the 2016 primaries are happening for the presidential election, and all the way through the actual election. And that was happening in real time. And we were, really listening to that stuff on the radio. And it was, and the only way that I thought that I could, even mess with that is just like, if it was wholly personal, if it was just, like it wasn't political, that it was about Dave's very personal experience with this thing. And what that ended up being when Trump did get elected was this incredible feeling of just kind of like there's this cognitive dissonance. There was this betrayal, because everything that he had been taught growing up by all of the people that taught him, how to be a human, was not being considered in one of these most important decisions, in this American experiment. And he was really hurt, and he took it really personally. And it wasn't just like, the Republicans. It was like, these specific people in his mind that he felt really betrayed by. And so, him characterizing that, this kind of ability to, vote against your, everything that you purportedly are about for one or two issues, as idolatry, I thought was so fascinating, because it's, kind of turning this language of this culture back on itself in a really interesting way that hopefully people can understand. And there is a check to it where it's like, oh yeah, like if we're willing to do whatever to gain this specific thing, then that's idolatry. Then
that's what you're worshiping. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we are worshiping these things, and we think that we know better than, the balance of whatever we believe in. And we're tipping the scales, and we're looking over things. And, that's just not how balance is talked about in the Bible. And so, yeah, long rambly way of saying, I thought it was helpful.
Yeah, no, I agree. Gosh, I'm trying to read the lines. There's about 26 like things. So when I watched the screening, I started it on the TV because I'm pretty sure your email said many people find, so there's something in it that said many people find if you'll like open this up here and then play it, it works better on a bigger TV. Right. But then I found myself needing to do other things, and so I'd pause it, fire up the laptop, move it to where I'm doing my thing, and then carry it around the house with me. And I just opened up a notepad and just kept typing into it. So I resonated a lot with what David kept talking about. So I appreciate your ability to get him to be candid. Yeah. Candid's the right word there. So I have two more questions for you. The first one is one that I alluded to a minute ago. So when you, Brandon, not Brandon's view of what David thinks, or your wife, or your whatever, when you say, here's what God is, like when I say the divine God, whatever you want to call it, use whatever metaphor you like, what do you actually mean? Like if you were trying to explain it to, I don't know, a 10-year-old or a 25-year-old, whatever, doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's such a hard question. And I think, and I'm so thankful that it gets to continue to evolve with us, and that we can continue to be in process. And so, my answer to that today is so different than it would have been before this film, or before I had, my two girls or whatever. And that's beginning to already answer the question, is that kind of, this unfolding version of, what is possible in humanity and on this planet, and in between each other. And so I don't know, I think more recently I have the kind of revelation of nature and self has weighed heavier to me than the revelation of scripture. And I've been in a process of kind of rebalancing these things. And that's the thing to me. I think that it is, I believe Jesus is who he said he was. I believe that, at risk of sounding super hippie, and that it is a balance, that's kind of what I think of, when I think of it, is harmony, and that expression through Jesus Christ and his life here on earth, that expression through all the revelations that we are surrounded by, our gut, all these things. But it comes back down to harmony, and I think that love is possible in harmony. And so that's kind of the action version of God is love, and the kind of passive version is this harmony.
Yeah, love it. Thank you for that. I'm aware of how small that question is. So
well, it's good because people go wherever they go, which obviously
I've yet to get the same answer yet. But there have been some answers that I'm like, I wasn't expecting that. That's beautiful. And other answers, depending on the person, I'm like, I like the way you said it. I kind of expected that. I wouldn't tell them that, but other ones I'm like, I was actually taking notes, or took notes. Which actually with you I did. So the thing I wrote down was, forging a relationship with silence. I'm gonna have to wrestle with that a bit. I like that a bit, but anyway. So in closing, there's a lot in the film, and there's a lot that's hard to talk about in the film because I find myself unable to voice some of my questions well. Partly because I see myself, and I think a lot of people that watch the film are going to kind of relate to it and be like, I've been there. If I'm honest, I've been there. And if I'm honest, I'm still there. I fake it every time I go to church.
Right.
I'm really good at faking it because I know the language, so I can do that. So
totally.
In closing, like, if there's something I didn't say, or something like, as you watch the film, here's what you need to hear. I wanted to give you like that last moment. Like, is there anything at all that you're like, I really would like to say this, and you don't have to if there's nothing.
No, I mean, I think that's the goal, as a filmmaker, and this kind of expression of art, is that this thing can stand alone, and that there need be no context or scaffolding, that you need, that there's enough in there, and there's enough kind of threads of humanity, that people can interact with something in a way that feels honest, even to the point where, I hope, and was, tried really hard to make a film that was clear that you don't need to know who David Bazan is, or have any relationship with his music or anything like that this is the everyman that just happens to be incredibly gifted at expressing himself as an orator and as a musician, and his life looks a lot like his the way he talks. So
yeah, perfect. So where do people go? So it's in iTunes. It's probably at a website. I'm not sure where. Like where would you
Yeah.
send people to? And then also your other films. I'm gonna watch the one on silence. Not today. It's late
Yeah,
this
no,
week.
for sure. Yeah, I'm super interested to hear your thoughts on that. So yeah, Strange Negotiations is on iTunes, it's on Amazon, it's on Vimeo, it's pretty much wherever interact with stuff. We haven't figured out the streaming thing yet, in terms of a Netflix or Hulu type thing. But for purchase and rental, it's available on all those sites. The website is strangenegotiationsfilm.com. All the socials are super easy to find.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of really interesting conversation around the film on those socials. Yeah, and then the past films are all In Pursuit of Silence, which I made with Patrick Shen, and the film before that, La Source, also with Patrick Shen. Those, they're both available on iTunes. And yeah, I'm trying to think of, short films are on Vimeo.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Cool.
that's, let the internet guide you.
Just
It's all pretty easy to find.
fair enough. Cool. Well, Brandon, thank you. I've enjoyed it, and thank you again for letting me watch the flick
Yeah,
and for your
man.
time tonight. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate you spending the time with it and shining light on it. This making art and trying to put it out into the world in this kind of independent way is
Mhm.
so difficult. And I think now, it's so much more helpful to be able to interact and engage with a thinker like you, with a platform that you've curated with an audience. Rather than Facebook ads or, putting a billboard up or some dumb thing that, it's just like, there's so much noise out there that,
Yeah.
For you to, engage in it thoughtfully and have these questions and, show your audience a bit of this, I'm super thankful for.
Yeah, that's my pleasure. That's my
Yeah.
pleasure. All right, so I'm going to end that recording there, and I have a question for you. Have you
Yeah.
watched? I don't need this anymore. That's literally just for the audio.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a better way to do this. I just use like one of these Zoom.
Yep.
Yeah, um, yeah, it works. It's good enough. Nobody said
Yeah.
anything with a cheap
Yeah.
mic. The rest is
Yeah.
all editing. So, um, have you watched? There's a documentary called "Becoming Truly Human." It's actually on Amazon.
No, I'm gonna
Yeah,
have to
so
make a note of this.
I interviewed him, but I think you would love the documentary. So he
Yeah.
basically talks about the nuns, like the people that have no religious affiliation. It's on Amazon Prime. I think it's included in your Prime streaming if you
Yeah.
have that.
Okay.
But he is a professor of philosophy. My conversation actually with him was like 2 hours long. Legitimately, I looked at him like, bro, I have 4 minutes left. I don't want to rush you, Nathan, but
Right.
4 minutes, and then
Yeah.
I'm literally out of recording space, and this is a lot of gigs we're burning. What I don't care,
Right.
but he interviews like a bunch of young kids about their religious affiliation or disaffiliation, and then talks about him and his family and how they like fell away from church and then ended up going into Eastern Orthodoxy, but his wife wasn't on board, and this, that, and the other. But it's about, and you said something earlier about, religion is like an expression of humanity or something like that. And it made me think of that. That's why I wanted to tell you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
that sounds
he
fascinating.
quotes like Athanasius talking about, like to talk to God is to become fully human.
Yeah. Yeah.
Goal. And something you said reminded me of it. So I wanted to tell you before I let you go.
I'm fascinated by that.
It's pretty good. It's what, and he also is an artist. Like he went to school, like art school or something like that, and paints, and I don't know. Yeah, he's all over the place. So
nice.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely check that out.
Cool.
Awesome,
well, I appreciate
man. Yeah, it was super good connecting, and I hope that our paths cross in the real world at some point soon.
I enjoyed it. All right, I'll give you back your 7:00, your early evening, and I'm gonna head.
Yeah, no, I'm just in time to help with the bedtime routine.
Perfect. Well,
you know about that.
thank you. Yeah, thanks to your spouse for sharing you. I know how big bedtime is. So
Yeah,
yeah,
man.
yeah.
All right.
Perfect. Have
Talk
a good night.
soon.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.